Hello. It's good to see you again. Today I wanted to talk about something that I cannot believe I haven't talked about yet, and that is my top 10 favorite books of all time. I think it is essential knowledge for whether or not you want to follow somebody, whether or not you want to be friends with somebody. You got to know what their favorite books of all time are. So I think these 10 books give a really good understanding of who I am as a reader, who I am as a person. We have a wide scope of decades. We have a wide scope of countries of origin. We have a wide scope of genre within fiction. So I think that this is a pretty diverse list that encapsulates what I like, who I am. I think that I've only talked about 2 of these books before on this channel, so this is not going to be any extreme repetition. So I hope you join me. We'll start with number 10, and we'll go all the way up to number 1. Sitting at number 10 is a book that practically everyone has had to read at some point in their life, and that is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This book is so much fun. It is about a group of boys that their plane crashes on a stranded island, and they try to form rules, they try to form a civilization as they wait for their parents, as they wait for rescue. But eventually, the leader that they created, the rules that they created, the society that they created starts to crumble, and chaos takes over. This book, I can see why this is such a popular, highly read, highly rated book, because for a few reasons. First, the vocabulary in here is fantastic. There are so many words in here that I had simply never heard of before, like ululation means howling. I had never heard that one before, and I doubt I ever would had it not been in here. Plus, the sentences are super flowery and super well put. Just the way that the sentences are strung together, you can really feel like you're on this island. You know, you can picture the lush greenery, you can picture the trees, you can picture these evil things that are starting to happen. You can see these boys' faces with maybe face paint on them. This is a really, imagery is done fantastic in Lord of the Flies. And on the surface level, it's fun. It's boys parading around on islands, boys trying to find a way for themselves, some of them trying to hunt, some of them trying to build structures. It's super fun. But it also has many themes as you look deeper, as you think more about it. There are a lot of themes in here that Golding was trying to point out with a fun story about boys. He was trying to bring up the point as society is only as strong as its weakest link. So there is always going to be this kind of evil and weak undertone to any society, and that can really crack at any point in time. So kind of a main theme here is that there's really a large tension between savagery and civilization within any civilization. So it's easy for a society that appears civilized and capable and ready and prepared. Within a civilization like that, there is always going to be a possibility for violence. So whenever rules are removed or whenever rules can be overtaken, the society can crumble very, very easily, as per human nature. So in the end, this book captures fun and good writing and good vocabulary and good themes very, very well. I really love Lord of the Flies. I spoke about this book in the library reading challenge video, and I spoke about it at length for a moment, so I won't talk your ear off about this, but sitting at number 9 is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This book is incredibly simple, and I could see that that could be understood as a fault in some regards, but I think that the intentional simplicity really speaks volumes to what it is trying to present. So this book is about a boy who has a dream a couple times where he finds treasure underneath a pyramid. So he's set off on this adventure to find his treasure. So in his journey to find said treasure, he meets people that carry his journey forth. He has experiences that makes him kind of understand how the world works. He begins to have these experiences that speak to him as a person. What this book really largely looks at is kind of the culmination between free will and fate. And largely what this book is trying to present is that everyone has a personal legend. So what they are put on this earth to do, what they are meant to be good at, what they are meant to give to the world. Everybody has this personal legend, and you can either be content with a life not fulfilling your personal legend. You can be a sheep just following a shepherd, or you can follow your personal legend, and you can have this great and deep personal fulfillment and personal culmination by following your personal legend. So yes, this book is very simple. But through this story, our main character, Santiago, speaks with the wind. He speaks with a man that has jewels on a chest plate. I just think that if you are really interested in things that are about oneness and personal fulfillment and finding your journey and finding your purpose, I think that this is an incredibly sweet story that left a fantastic impact on me. I rarely ever feel such a large emotional connection to a book, and this one really, really did that for me. So it may not be the height of cerebral literature, but I think The Alchemist is valuable for every reader that wants to find themselves. Sitting at number 8 is Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. This is one that, whenever I was first reading it, I didn't see how it could possibly impact me, because the purpose of the story is murder justifiable? And I didn't think I ever needed to think whether I was good or bad if I murdered somebody, because I never plan on doing so. But after reading this did leave a very, very large impact on me, because this is one of the most masterfully written stories ever. This story follows Raskolnikov, and he is a man who lives in the dregs of Russian society. He dropped out of school, and he's living in this tiny little room in slovenly conditions, and he's not paying his rent quick enough, and life is bad for him. But Raskolnikov seems to blame most of his problems on a pawnbroker that is a bit sleazy. And this sleazy pawnbroker woman, Raskolnikov decides that if he kills this pawnbroker woman, who is sleazy and rips people off, if he kills her, then that will actually be a net plus for society. That will be a good thing that he will be giving to society by killing this woman. So the question that this raises is murder justifiable? You know, can murder be a good thing? And it's not a spoiler that he kills her, because that happens within the first act of this book. And so afterwards, Raskolnikov just deals with the psychological turmoil of killing somebody. And so he wrestles with his guilt, his anxiety, his redemption that he hopes will come about. And this is the first ever psychological thriller. This was, I think, back in 1860s in Russia, I believe. Yes, 1866 is when this was written. And so it's regarded as the first psychological thriller, because throughout this whole story, you are wondering, are they going to catch him? Is Raskolnikov going to be okay? What's going to happen to Raskolnikov? So this is incredibly thrilling, because you have no clue at any point in time what might happen next. And clearly Raskolnikov doesn't know either, and he's going through these faint-headed, feverish experiences, not knowing what's going to happen to him after what he did. So this is a really deep dive into the human mind, looking at guilt and consequences of your actions and morality. And so it's a great dive into existentialism, or the morality of murder or moral philosophy. So just in the end, Raskolnikov, throughout this whole story, he is really battling between rationalization and evil, sin for what he did. So this is a very fun and thrilling story, and it is a very big stepping stone in bringing Russian literature to the global literature landscape. This is such a great book. Next, this is many, many years later, in 2019, Ocean Vuong wrote On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This is one of the first books that I read whenever I was getting back into reading a couple years ago, and it still remains within my top 10, and I think it will remain within my top 10 forever. What is particularly notable about this book is it is so poetic. The words are strung together in such a beautiful and humanly captivating way that this will stick with me forever. The premise of this story is it is letters from our main character, Little Dog, and he's a Vietnamese American kid writing to his mother, who has really bad PTSD and trauma from Vietnam War. And these are letters that she will never read because she can never read them. And it really, really deeply looks into his relationships and his struggles and how he deals with the way that his mother reacts to things, with having this PTSD, with having these personality troubles. And it looks at his experiences as an immigrant. It looks at his experiences dealing with just who he is inside and outside. So beautiful. Ocean Vuong is definitely, I think, my favorite author writing right now. He is usually a poet, and that does explain why this is so unbelievably poetic. But this book is so good for, I haven't experienced a single thing that Ocean Vuong has. Nothing. But through this book, he puts things in such a way that speaks to you, even if you don't experience anything like that. He can still make you feel like you've experienced these things. He still brings it into this humanity that you really, really connect with, even if you don't relate to it. You feel like you relate to it. So masterfully written. And it's structurally very, very unique and experimental, but it works out so very well. So through this letter format, you're kind of jumping between experiences in a way that you kind of orient yourself to as you read through it, but very experimental, but again, works so very well. I think that what Vuong puts in here is so very human and so very raw that it's an experience that you can never capture again. I've never read anything like this, and I doubt that I ever will ever again. So good. Sitting at number 6 is another book that is so unbelievably unique that, again, I doubt I will ever read anything like it ever again. Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. This book is written as a fictional biography, where a woman whose wife died, she's writing a biography about her late wife, and the wife was this elusive celebrity that put on these personas and these characters and was in the art scheme and I don't even know how to describe her. Really interesting, unique woman that was never herself, because this wife who's writing this story never knew what her real name was, never knew where she was born, never knew her birth date. This woman was elusive to everybody. She never told even her closest confidant who she was, inwards or outwards. She would drastically change her appearance. She would change her name all the time. She would get involved in these various art exhibits. Really, really interesting. And so it's written as a biography. Obviously, it's all fictional, but it's written as a kind of investigative biography of trying to find out who her late wife was whenever she was alive. So she traces back where she was born, when she was born. She tries to speak to people that were large within X's, her wife's, life. Very unique, very interesting, and very, very well written. And it's sprinkled throughout with pictures. Like it feels like you're reading a biography about the most interesting person that's ever been born. Just like super unique. And I think that also the first page, this is one of the most well-written pages I've seen before. Like, I think once I read this, you can pause if you like. I think once I read that, I knew that this was instantly going to be a 5-star read. I will read it for you if you'd like. The first winter she was dead, it seemed every day for months on end was damp and bright. It had always just rained, but I could never remember the rain. And I took the train down to the city a few days a week, searching, it seemed, for a building I might enter and fall from, a task about which I could never quite determine my own sincerity. As it seemed to me, the seriousness of anyone looking for such a thing could not be understood until a body needed to be scraped from the sidewalk. With all the recent attacks, of course, security had tightened everywhere, and you had to have permission or an invitation to enter any building, and I never had such things, as I was no one in particular, uncalled for. 1.5 people kill themselves in the city each day, and I looked for them, the one person or the half person, but I never saw the one, and I never saw the half, no matter how much I looked and waited, patiently, so patiently, and after some time I wondered if I could not find them because I was one of them, either the one or the half. Like, is that not great? So this is just structurally and thematically, and everything about this book is so unique and like nothing else I have ever read before. And it also even makes like a political system kind of in this area. Very interesting. Like this is the type of thing that I can't even put into words how different this book is. You should read this. This is the last book that I read. I just finished this book the other day and it is already at spot number 5. I have never in my life been so captivated and obsessed with a book before. Like, I have never felt so within the hands of a master as I have when I was reading this book. This is 5 interconnected books, kind of connecting in this border city, this Mexican border city, where terrible things are kind of happening. But I was kind of scared to read this book because I thought that it might be too bleak or too horrific for my taste, which it is a bit bleak and it is a bit horrific, but the way that Bolaño writes his sentences, he is so unbelievably masterful. This has got to be some of the best written I have ever seen. So this book kind of seems to blend together both time and space, and it breeds this literary dignity while proving cross-cultural importance and converging in this one city to root this event. And to root these stories in one place. That is 2666, Roberto Bolaño. So of these 5 stories, I thought the first and the last were the best, but they were all very good, except for, I'll get into it in a second. But upon reading part 1, upon reading the first couple pages, I could instantly tell that I was within the hands of a master, and I was about to go on some literary journey that I have never before experienced. So part 1 is set around these 4 literary critics, translators that are really obsessed with this elusive German author named Archimboldi. So this love and this obsession for Archimboldi brings them kind of together as friends and pushes their life forward. So, through this obsession, Bolaño seems to kind of be asking, what's the point of obsession if you're not creating something? Because these people, with all of this obsession in their hearts, they just want to find Archimboldi, they just want to talk to Archimboldi, they just want to be near Archimboldi. With all this obsession in their hearts, their lives don't seem to work out too well. The relationships with one another get a little bit odd. But every so often they go to these conferences where then they meet up again and they talk to one another and have these literary conversations with one another. It's very, very interesting. And I think what I liked most about the first book, the part about the critics, is that it would bring up these real German authors that I know of, like Heinrich Boll, Ernst Junger, Stefan Zweig. It would bring up these important German authors that I know and love, and it made this book feel more real. And also what I liked about that is it listed a bunch of other German authors that now I need to read. So it basically was just giving me a reading list for future reading on my own. The second story, and this was the shortest one, this was, I guess, supposed to be the worries of the common man. It was about a man who moved his daughter to this border city, and it is dangerous for young women. And so he kind of struggles with that internally, and he starts to hear voices, and he starts to do weird things that no one really expects. No one really understands why he's doing these things, like hanging a geography book on a clothesline outside to see how it weathers. What are you doing? So it's like these deep-seated paranoia experiences that he's having kind of change who he is. And it's also interesting because through this part, you also are getting recounted these letters that he's receiving from his wife. His wife had ran off because she had had a sexual encounter with a poet many, many years ago before she met her husband. And so she found out that this poet is in a mental institution, and she wants to go rekindle their love that the poet doesn't have for her because the poet's actually gay. Weird premise on this one. But again, with the sentences, the way that Bolaño writes these things down, super, super captivating. Part 3 is about a African-American social justice journalist from America, New York. And he is sent by his, newspaper company down to this border city to cover a boxing match that is happening in Santa Teresa, this border city. And while he's there, he starts to find out about these murders and these evil things that are happening. And he wants to then follow that story instead, because to him, that's an important story to follow. And instead, he gets pushed back on this, no, just cover what you were sent there to cover and then come back home. And in this story, it connects with the other ones because the man from part 2, his daughter, was then in part 3 as like a really integral character. So there is vague connections between these five books. This guild that has been on the surface really cracks significantly within book 3. And within book 3, you kind of get more insight into, wow, it's really evil what's happening in this city. So part 3 kind of gets you ready for part 4. Now, part 4 is the only part of this book that I felt like was a bit of a slog, because all it was, practically, was just a list of names, dates, and how women were killed. and it would just like list one after the next. Okay, we get the point. So part 5, skim that part. Really not necessary, because there was just enough story and just enough development that you had to keep reading, and you couldn't skip. But so Bolaño really did make you read every sickening word. Part 4 was a bit sickening. But yeah, part 4, you can skip if that's not your thing. Like, it does introduce you to a key character in part 5, but I think you get the point. Part 5 is why this book is now one of my favorites of all time. Part 5 is incredible. Part 5 as a standalone book, if it just would have been part 5, would easily have been one of the greatest books of all time, even if I hadn't been captivated by parts 1 through 4. Part 5, literally as a standalone, is some of the greatest writing I have ever seen before. Now, obviously, I did like part 5 because I love German perspective World War stories. That's my favorite genre. That's my favorite realm of any literature, of any art. I love German perspective World War stories, okay? And that is what part 5 was. So obviously I was bound to like it. But part 5, you find out about Archambaldi. You get Archambaldi's backstory, which, you know, brings it back to part number 1, where they were looking for Archambaldi. And this story, the way it's hard for me to even put this one into words, because it's so undeniably, so masterfully written. Okay, I'll read some sentences just to give you some examples of what I'm talking about, okay? So for short context, our main character finds a journal that he's reading through, this guy's journal, and in this journal, the guy who wrote the journal is talking about his friend Ivanov, who has been arrested for suspected war crimes, okay? During his time in the cell, Ivanov made friends with a rat he called Nikita. At night, when the rat came out, Ivanov held long conversations with her. As one might imagine, they didn't talk about literature, and certainly not about politics, but about their respective childhoods. Ivanov told the rat about his mother, who was often in his thoughts, and his siblings, but he avoided talking about his father. The rat, whose Russian was scarcely a whisper, talked in turn about the Moscow sewers and the sky in the sewers because of the blossoming of certain debris or an inexplicable phosphorescent process. There were always stars. She also talked to him about her mother's warmth and her sister's foolish capers, and how she had laughed at those capers. Even now, as she remembered them, they brought a smile to her narrow rat's face. Sometimes Ivanov let himself succumb to despair as he rested his cheek on his palm and asked Nikita what would become of them. Then the rat looked at him with sad, perplexed eyes, and her look told Ivanov that she was even more innocent than he was. A week after he had been locked in the cell, although for Ivanov it seemed more like a year, he was interrogated again, and no one had to hit him to make him sign various papers and documents. He wasn't returned to his cell. They took him straight out to the courtyard, where he was shot in the back of the head and his body tossed in the bed of a truck. That like 3 short little paragraphs, you understand the fears, you understand what's going on in this guy's mind, you know, and then cutting it off so sharply like that. Wow. That is one of the best passages that I've ever read before. That is so good. You understand what's going on in his head. You understand what's happening around him. Wow. And also a smile came to her little narrow rat's face. They didn't talk, as one might expect, they didn't talk about literature or politics, but about their respective childhoods. Are you kidding me? That is so good. Okay. And just to point out one more, and then I'll stop talking about this, just to point out one more sentence that I thought was just incredible. In part 5, it starts off with a man who went to World War I, and he lost his leg, and then he came back in town, and he married a one-eyed woman. And his big concern was, where are all the Prussians? You know, the Prussian nation is missing. What a tragedy. Okay? Listen to this sentence, given that context. Then his mother stared at him with her blue eye, and the boy held her gaze with his two blue eyes. And from the corner near the hearth, the one-legged man watched them both with his two blue eyes, and for 3 or 4 seconds the island of Prussia seemed to rise from the depths. The writing in here is so good. And usually things that are brutal or things that are a little too bleak, I don't like them very much, but this story is so unbelievably masterful that I was truly addicted to this story. I could not get enough. You should read this. Sitting at number 4 is a book that I have talked about at great length on this channel because I posted a very full review of it a couple weeks ago. And that is East of Eden. This is undeniably in my opinion, the greatest work of American literature ever. It has a very wide scope and covers a couple generations of just people interacting with each other, and it speaks to human nature so very well. What Steinbeck does so well in this book is his character writing is impeccable. All of these characters feel so real. All of their motives are so human and so practical and believable. And the lines that these characters say, you believe them wholeheartedly, and you think, oh, of course Samuel said that. This book is largely a Cain and Abel retelling from the Bible. And it pretty much looks at the challenge between destiny and free will. What you expect yourself to be because of your background or who people think you are or what you came from or who your parents are. The difference between expectations and you have the choice to be who you are. That is what is the battle between in this story. And again, with the writing, Steinbeck can write so powerfully in both many words. He can be very flowery and beautiful and descriptive. And he can also have equal amounts of power in scant sentences where just a few words he can tell such a great story. And he uses the powers of both of that greatly within this book. I think that what is also really good about this book is it is so very easy and accessible. This is not the type of story that you struggle to figure out. It's not the type of story that it's too complicated to comprehend. It's simply enough put that you understand everything that's going on and it's still making you think. So at no point do you have to struggle while reading this book. All you have to do is think about these things and love these characters and learn these lessons. So unbelievably powerful. So I posted a fuller review on this a couple weeks ago. So look at that if you want to hear more thoughts on this, but so very good. So very perfect. Sitting at number 3 is All Quiet on the Western Front. As I said earlier when I was talking about 2666, I love German perspective World War literature, and that is exactly what this is. So I did talk about this in my favorite war books of all time video from a couple weeks ago. So again, I won't talk your ear off about it, but All Quiet on the Western Front is regarded as the greatest war novel of all time for a very good reason. It captures every aspect of what a war does to both an individual, to a society, and to the world as a whole. It captures everything. And it does so in a pretty simple narrative written by a 17-year-old boy. Wow. It really captures individual experiences and individual horrors and individual struggles and thoughts in a way that really, really sticks with you. And so it weaves in and out between horrific experiences and moments of calm before the storm in a way that you can never really sit back and relax. So you're fully, the whole time when you're reading it, you're stuck within these horrific moments and you can never step away from the horrors, which is exactly what this book needs to do. And it also really powerfully speaks to just the generational fallout of what a war can do. Because through this story, all of these boys don't feel like after the war, if they make it back home, if they survive, they don't feel like they could just go back to normal life. They're not normal people anymore. And they just feel like the whole generation just crumbles and means nothing. Just, wow. This book captures everything it needs to, and it is so good. So, so good. Please read this. And my second favorite book of all time, maybe my first favorite, depending on the day you ask me, but I think my second favorite book of all time is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This is a wide-scope Western about the end of the cowboy days, and it is set around two retired rangers, Call and Augustus, and they take with a group of ragtag cowboys, they go on a cattle drive from the bottom of Texas all the way up to Montana on this cattle drive. And what is so wonderful about this, much like East of Eden, is the characters are so memorable and so real. Any line that these characters say, you think, of course Gus said that. Everybody is so themselves, and everything is so very human. So well written in that regard. So Gus is usually this carefree optimist, good-natured fella, and then Call is kind of this stoic, has some troubles in his past that he still lingers on type of guy who really leads the group. And through the two of these, the story is really carried forward. And this book doesn't shy away from the agonies and the horrors of the Wild West. This book does get brutal at certain points, especially when dealing with, this savage guy named, Blue Duck? What is his name? Yeah, especially whenever they deal with Blue Duck, this savage guy that is going around and killing all sorts of people and causing all sorts of trouble for everybody that he encounters. This guy's a lunatic. And so especially with him, there is a lot of horrors. And aside from just Blue Duck, dealing with just the untamed frontier, headed up north, wonderful. The way that these men combat this atmosphere and combat this frontier, wonderful. And so even, I haven't really read many Westerns. I'm not opposed to Westerns at all, but I think that Lonesome Dove is the type of book that goes past genre. I don't care if you don't read Westerns. Lonesome Dove is a book for everybody at all times. This really brings together humanity and the uncaring, unfeeling frontier of the American West in a way that captures this story that is so captivating. And all you want to do the moment you finish this book is pick it right back up and start over, even though it took you about a month because it's about 1,000 pages long. And this is the type of book that these characters stick with you forever. I think about this book all the time, and I read it over a year ago. So good. And my favorite book of all time is Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. This book blends together magical realism and fantasy and dark humor. It is about the devil coming to Moscow, and he brings with him a group of oddball supernatural people, including a giant talking cat that smokes cigars and drinks vodka. And they wreak havoc on the city. They have seances, they bother people, but they also offer some signs of divine grace. But at its heart, Master and Margarita is a poke at Soviet Russia. They're poking fun at bureaucracy, about stifling creativity, and just overall, this is anti-Soviet literature. So this wasn't allowed to be published whenever it was first written, and it was only published much later. So both with this book being super fun and also it having political, historical importance, obviously I was bound to love this book. It has a talking cat that smokes cigars and drinks vodka and plays bad chess. Come on. So it follows two main storylines. The first one, obviously, is where the devil is wrecking this havoc and having seances. And it also goes back to Jesus soon to be executed on and crucified on the cross. So it is set between those two very important pieces in time. And it also kind of follows a third storyline as well later in the story about two lovers named Master and Margarita. And it is overall just about unfilled desires between the two of them. And so all three of these storylines by the end kind of intertwine into this fervent love and sacrifice and spiritual redemption just in an incredibly powerful way. And looking at the themes of good and evil in this story, Bulgakov isn't having clear-cut good versus evil. Obviously, the devil is an evil character, but here he's, apart from just pure evil, he's kind of a sign of justice and cosmic justice, giving people what they deserve, whether that's good or whether that's bad. So it kind of blurs the lines between good and evil. Obviously, even though obviously we're talking about the devil in this story. So it is an ambiguous look at what good and evil are. So in the end, it's complex, it's surreal, it speaks to, Soviet society, it speaks towards bureaucracy. This book encapsulates so very much in a magical and bizarre way. And even though it was translated from Russian, so obviously I did not read it in the way it was originally written, this book is beautifully written. I mean, the way that these sentences are strung together is so very funny and so fun and so telling, like so deep at times, but also it'll make you laugh. So those are my top 10 books of all time. I think that if you asked me on any other day, the order of this list is subject to change, especially as I read more, but as of right now, that is solidly what I believe my top 10 books of all time to be. So I do read in a pretty wide scope of fiction, I believe. Westerns, Russians, I don't know, some contemporary stuff as well. So I would love to hear what your favorite book of all time is, or even your top 10 if you have a dignified list. I would love it to hear what your favorite books are, because you listened to me talk this whole time about what my favorites are. So I look forward to talking with you guys in the comments, and I also look forward to seeing you next weekend.